Hello everyone, it's your favorite West Virginia in space here, and I was watching my brother one time when he was on Tubi watching like British versions of the ABCs. I don't quite understand it, and I saw the thumbnail for this documentary called Theft of the Black Gods, which I knew the second I read that there was a very high chance this was going to be a very particular kind of documentary, so I looked into it, and it basically revealed that it was a documentary supposedly, we'll get to that, talking about how African and black culture influenced the superhero movement, how black religion influenced that, and how stuff like that and all that jazz. And I was like, okay, I know what this is gonna be, but I'm gonna watch it because I thought it'd be something fun to talk about with my friends of how probably silly it was gonna be. Oh no, this is way worse than that. It is filled with so much misinformation and straight up lying that I fully and unabashedly believe that it is the equivalent of Netflix Cleopatra to superheroes. And they talk about so much random nonsense in this documentary, quote unquote, from superheroes to religion to history, and they somehow get pretty much all of it wrong. So the only logical response is to make a video basically debunking like a lot of their claims or just discussing it. It's just such a mess. And I'm gonna be warning about you, the chapters are gonna be, the points they say are all over the place in the documentary, so I'm gonna have to kind of break them down myself into their own chapters, and it's not going to be necessarily coordinated of when they were brought up in the documentary, because that's just they say something for a minute and then move on to something else that's crazy. And I'm not covering necessarily everything in this documentary. I'm just talking about the points that were the worst or the most egregious in my opinion, and I'm not going to have a whole lot of bits from the documentary to show you, because most of the documentary just uses stock footage or copyright images. It was basically shot more like a YouTube video than a proper documentary in a lot of ways. But ultimately, so with all that said, disclaimer's over, let's get into it. Starting with the section on superheroes, we can open with the fact that they say very early on in the documentary actually that superheroes have no flaws, or heroes more broadly have no flaws, which is such a dumb claim. I don't even know why they would put it in here, because many heroes or superheroes are defined by their flaws, either some kind of weakness or personal failing, either power or moral wise. It's such a common thing with heroes, is the flaw, that I don't know why you would even put this in here. It's not even a point to anything they made. Now, moving on to something a bit more spicy, is when they say that bad guys wear black because blah 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 racism to associate with black people, which is also kind of a dumb concept, because the color black is in most cultures associated with evil or mysterious or generally just negative things. And this is coming from a guy whose favorite color is black. Black is my favorite color by a mile. But I have to accept that that's how most cultures work. And it's not just a European thing. Many other cultures, even African cultures, associate black with evil. But with superheroes especially, it's such a dumb claim to make, because many of the most iconic heroes wear black. Batman is associated with the color black. He is the top 3 superheroes. He is one of the major archetypes of superheroes, and he wears black. But there are other characters like War Machine and Punisher who also wear black. So it's not like it's uncommon for superheroes to wear black. If there's any medium where saying that was saying, oh, it's racist because only the villains wear black, is stupid. In fact, there aren't even that many supervillains that wear black. Most of them wear other colors, especially as their primary. Now, another one we actually get to a specific character here is Xavier, where they try to say that he is more of a motherly figure to the X-Men than a fatherly figure, which is just dumb. But even more so, they try to say he's beyond physical pleasure and carnal stuff like that, which is so freaking dumb. Maybe the movie Xavier, but the comics Xavier? Dude, he had a crush on Jean Grey for years. An underrated girl, mind you. If that is not some messed up, out of control, quote-unquote, carnal desire type things, I don't know what is. And then we get into a little bit where they go on about how Black Panther is the first black superhero, when he's technically not. It's actually a character named Lion Man, although he's a very minor figure, and I think there might have been a few other superheroes before that, but I just felt like putting it in there because I just found that annoying. It just kind of shows that they don't do their research, because I was able to figure that out with just a quick Googling. Then they go into how Captain America is the is written as in the technologically created, genetically modified perfect Aryan, which is just stupid. It really is. As a Captain America fan, he's my favorite character. That's the dumbest take on the character I've heard in a very long time. First of all, the perfect Aryan in the Nazi beliefs, they try to say, it would be German, but Captain America is not German. He's Irish. Like, his parents are Irish immigrants. Like, he's already failing on that thing. But also is that he wasn't necessarily so much genetically modified like they say. He was given a serum. It's not exactly clear what it did genetics-wise. But even more so is that, and this is actually kind of interesting, is how they have occasionally played around with the fact that Captain America is kind of like everything the Nazis would want, but he's also their greatest enemy. And that's occasionally an interesting theme to do, best quoted in the first Avengers Captain America movie, when the Red Skull thinks he must be like some kind of like super Nazi or whatever, came from best stuff like this, and Captain America just said just a kid from Brooklyn, and it pisses the Red Skull off because it shoots his whole narrative that the Nazis built up for themselves. But the problem is he takes it in a horrible direction to imply that Captain America is like racist or something, which is so dumb, and it hurts me. It hurts. It's dumb, and the claims of Captain America being racist and stuff like that will never end, and they will never be smarter. But moving on from that, they then go on to, it's just a straight up lie, where they say that Marvel villains are very nuanced and complicated, and why DC villains are usually more simplistic, or just as they were, just simplistic, which is like, classical villains, which is just dumb. Like, it's actually dumb. Like, first of all, Marvel and DC are huge companies, and their characters have had so many different takes that Marvel and DC have tons of classic, like, just pure evil villains, tons of super sympathetic ones that are closer to, like, the quote-unquote anti-hero spectrum, and everything in between, right? But just conceptually, right, some of the most iconic, sympathetic, or complex villains are DC villains. Like characters like Mr. Freeze and stuff like that are iconic because of their sympathy. I'm not trying to claim which does sympathetic villains better, Marvel or DC. I'm simply saying that anyone with even a passing comic book knowledge would not make the claim that DC does not make or have tons of sympathetic villains. That is a dumb claim that anyone with even a passing knowledge of superheroes would be aware of. And now we get on to Superman, who they have a lot to talk about. And even this I had to condense down. And it's just dumb. So first of all, they keep insisting that Superman is a god, kind of like the Greco-Roman gods kind of thing, and his family house is the house of blah blah blah, like Olympus, which is just dumb because he's not. He's an alien, a mortal. I know sometimes in Superman media they act like he's a god, but the point is the usual point in the story is that he isn't a god. At the end of the day, he's a man with incredible powers. Sure, he's an alien, but he's more human than any of us. And that's kind of one of the points of this character, which actually brings into another point they bring up, is that they compare him like he's Jesus Christ, which, yes, some media makes that symbolism, but once again, it's not really true to the character, and it doesn't fit who he is, really. And I will forgive them slightly more, because that's a misconception that has actually been put by some media, but it's still not accurate to the character. And then we get to this just straight up lie. Like, they try to say that how Superman is, and I kid you not, how his real origin, his origin in the comics, right? They try to claim that his original origin was that he was a time traveler from the future who got sent back in time to the modern day, and he was meant to show the future of the white race and how they become blah 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 Superman. He's like so basically trying to claim Superman some like super racist kind of white nationalist thing, which is so freaking dumb because everyone knows Superman's origin, right? But for the sake of humor, I decided to check the very first issue of Superman. Did they, in fact, just maybe, was his original origin story a little bit wonky, and it very quickly got retconned to how we know it? Because that's not unheard of for comic book characters. You know what's the first page after the cover and ads of Action Comics #1, where Superman makes his first appearance? It's a condensed version of his origin story. From the planet Krypton that was dying, sent to Earth, grew up on Earth, blah, blah, all that. It's literally just a condensed version of the story we all know. No time travel, no white nationalist thing, none of that. They just lied. Like, there's no way to look around this. That was a straight up lie they made. Because everyone knows Superman's origin story, and any amount of research into Superman would disprove that whole idea. But they went with it. Because they are liars. They straight up lied here. And it gets worse. I know that sounds crazy, but trust me, it gets worse. Speaking of which, now the next section, mythology/religion, we actually start with an interesting the claim they make. That, well, at least let me talk about some interesting concepts I like to think about. Is that they try to claim that the Roman, Greek, Hindu, and Persian religions/cultures are all ripoffs of African religions that supposedly came before them. Now, to discuss this claim, we're going to have to do a little bit of explanation. You see, it's commonly believed that a lot of religions across the world can be grouped up into certain religious families, aka groups they descended from or share common influences from, that kind of because of shared characteristics they have. A lot of it's somewhat theoretical, while some of it's based on historical information. It's kind of like the blurry line in between them, incredibly fascinating. One of them, for example, is the Abrahamic religion family, which split off from ancient Judaism to become modern Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and all their many subsects. That's a pretty easy one that has a very clear historical line. But another one we believe exists, have good evidence for, is the Indo-European religion, which is believed to be the proto-religion that faced like the Greco-Roman, Hindu, Norse, and some others branched off from. Now, because of common motifs they share and archetypes and stuff like that. There's an interesting discussion of why we believe that exists, but that's a discussion for another day. Now, what's notable is, despite the fact how in pop culture and such, we often group up the Greek, Norse, and Egyptian gods together, the Egyptian gods are not part of this family, so to speak. The Egyptian religion is not part of the Indo-European religious family. They're kind of their own thing with some of the Babylonian gods and the Canaanite gods, and maybe I've heard some people try to argue that the Abrahamic family and the Egyptian religious family might be distant cousins, but that's a whole different discussion. But the important bit, though, is that traditionally the West African religions and Egypt that they like to go into were not part of the Indo-European religions. They would have some contact, and reasonably you could say there was some influences, especially at some points later on. But it would be unrealistic to claim that the Greek, Egyptian, that these religions that they mention, these faiths, would just rip off African religions, because they don't really rip off anything. There might be common motifs, and there might be a reason that they share these motifs, and you could say there's influences. After all, most of people came out of Africa, so reasonably they will be a little bit, but they aren't rip-offs. They're clearly distinct enough on their own to not count as that, which just seems that a claim of them trying to make a claim that doesn't make sense. Which, speaking of which, then began to has to be the most baffling claims of the video, where they try to say that there are 12 main Egyptian gods, which I searched everywhere, right? As a big fan of Egyptian mythology, I never heard of a concept of 12 Egyptian gods, right? That's just not a concept I'm aware of. And as far as I can tell, there is no such thing, especially because in actual Egyptian history, the nature of which gods were popular or considered important changed a lot. So reasonably, it would be unrealistic to imagine there would be 12 Egyptian gods that were constantly considered the most important 12 and given some special sacred status throughout all of Egyptian history. Worse yet, even if you could say there were 12 gods that were most popular overall, as far as I can tell, Egypt held no such importance to there being 12 distinct gods of major importance. That's just not how they operated. So that already you're starting the whole claim of this documentary that all these things are ripoffs. Because they try to claim that all these different things, right, are like ripping off the 12 Egyptian gods that don't actually exist properly. And they don't even go into the list of what, and I can't remember if they go into the list of those 12 Egyptian gods were or not, but the point is that it just doesn't exist. But I'm going to give you a list of everything they claim is a ripoff of the 12 Egyptian gods, quote unquote, and I'm going to go in exactly which ones don't, explain why they don't make sense as we get up to them, okay? Let's get going on this one. First, they claim that the 12 Greco-Roman gods, or the 12 main Greco-Roman gods, are rip-offs of them, which already, though you have the 12 Olympians, that's not even a static list, but, once again, the Greco-Roman religion is its own thing, but at least you're kind of right. At least you have some similarities there, somehow. Next, they say the 12 tribes of Israel, which doesn't make sense because the 12 tribes are not individuals. They are tribes, groups of people. And as far as I can tell, they have no major characteristics that would set them up as being copycats like that. So it doesn't even make sense. Next are the 12 disciples/apostles of Jesus, which already went into the problem of there being more than 12 apostles. But even if we look past that, there's the small issue of the apostles are real people, like historical people we knew and know existed. But that's just not a questionable fact. They are real. So how can they be rip-offs of something when they are real people? That doesn't even make sense. Like how? That's just stupid. The next is the 12 months of the year, which, why? like the 12 months are supposed to be a loose approximation of adding a lunar calendar to the solar calendar. It's not an exact match. There's always like inconsistencies and stuff like that, but that's because calendar time is weird. But they aren't based on Egyptian time like that. It's just a weird concept again. And the next one is the 12 names of the I can never say that right, but sorry, but like a Hindu god. As far as I can tell, that god is associated with 12 names, but I'm not at all an expert on Hinduism. I only have a very passing knowledge of it, so if anyone's actually familiar with Hinduism or is Hindu, if you could please comment down below about that, that'd be great. Next, the 12 sons of Odin, which is interesting because though Odin is attested to having sons, I did research into this. He's only usually associated with having around 2 or 4. Most lists usually only give him that many. Now, of course, sometimes those lists are inconsistent of which of those 4 there are, but overall, doesn't quite reach 12. Now, sure, Odin's a guy who constantly changes forms and sleeps around, so it might be reasonable he might have more than 12 sons, but as far as, like, named individuals of importance, it seems to be around 4. The highest number I could find of ever attesting of Odin's 12 sons was saying he had about 14 sons. That's already off. There is no list or importance to Odin's quote-unquote 12 sons, so they just made that up out of thin air, kind of like they did the 12 Egyptian gods things. Next is King Arthur's 12 Knights of the Round Table. As far as I could tell, there is some tiny bits of text here and there that say 12 knights, but even then, it's usually just kind of the most important ones, and once again, who are the most important knights switch out a ton. And even then, practically speaking, the Knights of the Round Table has almost always been depicted as a group at least a couple hundred strong. They've never been depicted, very rarely at least, as 12 knights. You could say maybe the 12 knights of most importance, but that feels like stretching it. The next is that they try to say that they are the next time they were ripped off was the 12 founding members of the Justice League, which already becomes a problem because there were not 12 founding members of the Justice League, only around 7 if I remember correctly, but not 12, not even close to 12. So that's just a complete lie right off the bat, which gets worse when they try to say the 12 they try to say they also were ripped off for the next 12 major Marvel characters, which once again that's a little harder to argue, but still seems kind of silly, especially because some of them we have very clear distinction of where they came from. But even worse is that they then try to say the 12 major X-Men are also ripped off of the 12 Egyptian gods, but they also made the mistake that X-Men are Marvel characters, so they should reasonably be counted. Like, how could you say the 12 most popular Marvel characters and then not have Wolverine in the list? The X-Men are Marvel characters. It's just stupid. And neither of these lists contain the Fantastic Four, who have had a serious impact on superheroes, just massively. The reason superhero teams are so popular as they are. Like, any research into superheroes would shoot this idea down faster than you could possibly imagine. Now, this gets now, to finally move on from that a little bit, we then try to get this, they made the claim very early on in the movie documentary, that the Greek-Roman god Apollo was ripped off from Horus, like he was taken from the Egyptian god Horus, right? But they only made the mistake of the tiny issue that Apollo is a Greek god, not a Roman one. A Greek god. The Romans got Apollo from the Greeks. Even if you wanted to try to say that Greek Apollo was somehow ripped off of Horus, which would be kind of silly, but whatever, you would still get the order of events wrong. Like, seriously, basic information about Greek mythology then became Roman mythology. It's not hard to know this timeline here. This is one of the most basic bits of Greek mythology timeline that anyone should know. And then starts the train of, scattered throughout the video, of claiming insert thing is actually insert African god. Usually Horus, but we get a few others. So I'm just going to condense this all here in the list. For Horus, who has by far the most, we have Apollo, Superman, Thor, both of them, Shango, a West African god, Hercules, Iron Man, Mars/Ares, and Jesus himself. And Jesus runs into the also problem of he is a historical person. Jesus actually existed. You could not rip off a Horus to be Jesus. Like, even if you believe that both Jesus and Horus are real, which we know Jesus is a factual person to exist with historical records, to know that he exists, even if they were both real, they couldn't be ripping off each other because it just doesn't make sense. It's stupid. Now, but to move on to some more miscellaneous ones, say, by the way, I'm really bad at saying a lot of these names, so I mispronounced them, sorry. They say Osha is West African god, Isis, Jean Grey, Gaia, and Storm, some of those Marvel characters, some of those other gods. Sobek, from Egyptian mythology, is Poseidon, Namor, and Aquaman, which... what? This just confused me. Then they try to say that the Egyptian god Set was ripped off / is really Loki's and Hades, which, no, like, why would you even say that? That's just stupid. And then they try to say that Bastet, the Egyptian god of cats, or one of them, there's a few of them, was also ripped off / is really Black Panther and Catwoman, which is, like, at least they have the symbolism of cats in common, so, thanks for at least trying. But then before we move on to the next section, we have to go on to their weird hatred towards religion, which is weird because they go on about how important, African religion is, but then bash everything else, especially Christianity. And some of their claims are rather silly, like, this just do not make sense. Like, one of them being is that, like, not believing in a god or gods is like their kryptonite, which doesn't make sense because if a god or if in a hypothetical scenario, right, for this scenario, which I believe in a god, but, let's just say for a hypothetical scenario, right, we have this independent world, right, and insert god is real, like God or Zeus or whatever, they're not going to be weaker because you don't believe in them. They will likely just get pissed at most, if even that, which is maybe not even true there. Now, we get some more stuff when you get to the area where they say, like, religions have a stranglehold on fear, and they want to set people up so they need saving, which is just not how that works. Like, that's not how religion works for humans. It's not that religion or faith or belief or spirituality gives fear to someone. It's that we have fear, we have questions, and we seek meaning. We seek understanding. We seek to understand the world. And through this, and partially divine revelations, if you're like me and believe that some of this is true, of course, is that you get religions, you get faith, you get belief, you get consistent figures through the chaos. But religions do not create fear. You do not end up with a situation where people are all happy and then the big bad religion showed up and gave everyone fear. That's just not how that works. Yes, there are people who are religious or use religion to weaponize or spread fear, but that's a specific people usually twisting it, and with almost every religion, into trying to do that. So already it's a very kind of like negative view to go with. It doesn't make a lot of sense, especially in the video discussion we have. So overall, this section was weird and bizarre and kind of nonsensical, but believe it or not, it gets worse. Oh yes, because the next section is even worse than this. The final section, labeled history, although it could probably be broadly considered more so like history and culture and a little bit of politics. Yay, everyone's favorite mix. Starts off strong for this video when he goes off about the African genome and how it's, I'm not even really reading between the line here, how it's basically how the document considers it superior to all others because it's the most diverse and where the other humans came from, which is already kind of a flawed logic. Like, they try to say that, though, the African genome is the most evolved of all the genomes. Actually, I'll just quote it verbatim here. When they say, the African genome is the oldest and most diverse of all the genomes, and it holds the unfathomable information and potential. Everything from medical advancement to gene modification to rewriting our evolution history is found in African DNA. This already has some flaws in it, purely because there is no oldest genome of humanity. We're all adapting and changing at an equal pace because it's how biology works. You could say it might be the first to kind of been created, while other groups like Europeans and Asians came later. Although it's kind of a flawed logic because there's the same amount of generations going on here. One's not more evolved or less evolved than the others. They're just slightly different, adapted to different environments, and I mean that in a very literal sense. Like, Europe's colder, so that's part of why a lot of European traits like pale skin showed up, and why Europeans are more hairy, for example. But like, none is more. Now saying it's the most diverse is probably a claim that, if you consider just the continent of Africa, it was a pretty accurate claim, more or less. Although it is worth saying that the North African populations are actually closer related to Europeans than they are the rest of Africa. But to act like it had, like, first of all, you can't rewrite history. That's just not how that works. But there is medical advancement to be found in like African genomes or African ethnicities, that kind of thing. But that's bad in every race and ethnicity. We've all developed certain traits to help us survive with just random mutations. If you were trying to come up with some kind of like way to deal with illness, like for example, like there's so much you could do, right? But it's not going to be just limited to one because there is no superior race of humans. We're all different and special, but no one's better or worse than anyone else. Not like in a strict Darwinian sense, like they like to act. But then they get into the next little bit of a claim here where they say, and I'm quoting once again here, is that they say, the African DNA is technology, and lies in it says that people have been trying to crack the African genome for hundreds of years, and says that the African DNA is being hijacked to make medicine, which is kind of a weird claim, because first of all, we didn't know DNA existed for hundreds of years. That just does not, like, we just didn't. Like, it's just a factual statement. We just did not know DNA existed for hundreds of years. You could not be looking for something you did not know existed. But even more so, if you're counting the West, for a sadly long time of history, scientists spent a long time trying to say how the Africans were, quote-unquote, less evolved than Europeans. They weren't looking for them to get superior traits. They thought they were lesser, which is a tragedy. It's awful that they would try to corrupt science to basically to keep racism going, but that's the fact of the day. They weren't looking for things to gain there. And to say hijack to make medicine is kind of a weird term. Like, there are some genes in certain African populations that could help with issues. Like the example they give, which I believe is correct, maybe they said, is that they go on about how like there's one ethnicity that's really good at dealing with like diabetes or something like that. But like, to say it's hijacked is mean-spirited. Like, first of all, once again, every ethnicity, every group of people has traits they have that could be beneficial to others. It's first of all, it's not just Africans, but even more so is that, like, how is that hijacking? It's not taking something from someone. It's trying to, like, you'll be trying to uncover this secret so you can make medicine and ways to heal people. And why would you act like it's hijack? It's not taking something from you. It's helping others. It's like oddly mean-spirited in a way that I just find bizarre. And they also say that now that blacks have the ability to evolve outside of white dependency and like blah blah blah, how they like do all this. And it's just like, first of all, humans, animals, the whole theory of evolution like that does not work on the time scale that slavery in the West and North America happened. It just doesn't. That was a few hundred years of awfulness, horrible tragedy, but not long enough to be noticed on the genetic record. How you want to look at that is anyone's business and whatever, but it's just not how evolution works. Like, just not. It's just stupid. Like, that's just dumb. And then we get to this next part where they say that, once again, quote, I quote a lot of this section because how weird it was. And the last little bit of a quote here, we're going here, is how they go on about how they don't want you, read like Africans here, to unlock your own potential before they, quote unquote, white people, as you can tell, have a chance to unlock and extract it and synthesize it. I'm not even entirely sure what they're talking about. Like, they mentioned a little bit later of how, like, the government was known to experiment on black people and black women specifically a lot more than other races. Which, at least in the American government, was true, or probably is true in some cases. But to get some context, it's because they were racist. They just didn't care if they hurt black people as much as other races, which is awful. It's tragic, but it's not because one was better or worse than the other, is that they were racist assholes and didn't care about hurting people because they were black. Pivoting back to superheroes a little bit, they also try to say that the X-Men are black, like all the X-Men, which is just a silly claim because they try to say how the word mutant was used, even though when the X-Men were written, that the idea of calling black people mutants was silly and no one did it really. And even if they did, the term mutants is associated with, radiation, gamma exposure, not black people from Africa. Like, that's just stupid. And they try to make all these connections, and they kind of loosely imply that the black Africans are the next stage in human evolution. They're basically trying to say Africans are X-Men, which is dumb, and the comics black shows it's dumb, and it's just stupid. But another interesting thing, a little more interesting, they try to say that Wakanda is actually is based on a real country, like South in Africa. Specifically, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Bukanoa in Tanzania, which, sorry if I mispronounced that, which if you quickly, with Wakanda and Marvel Comics, it's a purely fictional country, and it's never been exactly consistent where they put it on the continent. But with all the maps we've seen where it's mentioned it's pretty much always been depicted as just a little bit south of Ethiopia and sometimes to the west. The problem is that misses the mark of Tanzania by quite a lot. And we also have to remember that Africa is a very, very big continent. That would, like, the distance we're talking, they would mess up to get that, like, the claim they're making, would be like mixing up England and France. Like, that's a pretty big distance to mess up. And then they try to claim that Tanzanite represents vibranium and, like, blah, 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 the special gift of that country, which, once again, does not make sense, because where Wakanda is not where you would find Tanzanite. It just does not add up correctly. And then we get to this point where they say that superheroes, that is talking about like black youths reading superhero stories, and they say they don't connect them to their ancestral stories and culture, which, listen, I'm a big fan of certain aspects of like my quote-unquote genetic heritage, like the Normans and the English. I find that all cool and fascinating, right? But beyond anything about DNA or where your blood's from, I think culture is more important. The nation you're born in, the people you're born with, raised with, and the nation you live under and hopefully love and support, and hopefully it treats you fairly. And sadly, it doesn't always do that. But the thing is, I view culture, I think anyone that isn't racist views culture, what you believe in, as more important than what your blood is. And the kind of argument that they're making here is that black people should read black stories because they're black, not because they care about the culture or their ancestry or whatever, but because it's their stories because of their race, which I don't view as a good mentality, especially because it's not even like a family line. It's not saying, I like the stories of this group of like Ethiopia or Egypt because that's where my family's from. You're just claiming groups that just have no relation to you, really, just because they're black, which is kind of racist, in my opinion. And it gets worse because then they try to claim that superhero stories and hero stories in general are disempowering stories of slavery. I would love it if, like, superheroes were real for like a minute or whatever, and someone tried to tell that to like War Machine or Jon Stewart's Green Lantern or Cyborg or Storm or Falcon, that their stories were disempowering stories of slavery. I'd love to see the look on their faces as they either look at you with disgust or laugh out loud. That's the dumbest claim I've heard in my life. Like, why would you even make that claim? It's just dumb. It's untrue. I don't even know why you would try that. And then we get into this weird claim where they say that superheroes and the idea of heroes in general are fantasies of whiteness. What does that even mean? Like, I'm being honest here. That makes no sense. Every culture has heroes. Every culture has heroic traits and stuff like that. That is one of the most common traits of universal traits of a culture. And you pick any culture, they have a hero. It's like, to make that claim is, ironically enough, so ignorant of other cultures and religions and practices that it is hilarious. Like, it's truly hilarious. And then they try to say, in the form of a quote-unquote question, that there are superheroes white supremacists. Well, given the fact that most of the, like, tons of them aren't white, and, oh yeah, most of them were written, especially the really iconic original ones, were written by Jewish people during the height of anti-Semitism in Europe, thanks to the Nazis, I'm willing to bet no. I'm willing to bet, just, have a superiority, that maybe when they wrote Superman to be beating up the KKK, just possibly, I don't think they were white supremacists. Or at least not as bad as you want to claim they're being. And that's, speaking of the KKK, they also tried to say that the Ku Klux Klan in America, thankfully in the past, when they try to make this BS claim, is that they were heroes to all Americans. No. Now, granted, the Ku Klux Klan was real and it had real supporters and people who were sympathetic to them, and they were monsters. They all sucked. That was awful. But they were not at all considered universal heroes by Americans, purely on the grounds that the Ku Klux Klan wanted to kill all black people. That's what they wanted to do, and other people they considered lesser, like Italians and Spanish people, and all stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure Jews as well. And if all of America wanted to do that, why didn't that happen? And also, because generally speaking, black people don't support the KKK. And there have always been tons of black Americans. So obviously they weren't supporting the KKK. So your claim is bullshit. like, even when I told this to a friend, a European mind, not even American, he actually knew a song made during around the height of the KKK mocking them. Not later on, during the time they're making fun of them. That should tell you they were not universally supported and far from the heroes of all Americans. And this is the ultimate, like, lie about history, right? The ultimate final breaking point, in my opinion. You could just tell they were just making stuff up, they were purposely lying, and they were just dead-ass wrong, okay? I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. What they tried to say was that America in the 1930s and 40s, that time period, was as bad to black people in the 1930s and 40s as Nazi Germany was to Jewish people. That is such a bullshit lie, I can't even begin to comprehend it. It is pure stupidity and ritual lies. Because you know what happened to Jews in Nazi Germany? They died. Millions dead in concentration camps and on the streets, and wherever they could get the filthy Nazi hands, where they could do the monstrous act they did. And they did it, killed other groups too. Gypsies, black people they just didn't like. Oft. If America in that time period was doing that to black people, you would not see a black population in America today, because the only reason the Nazis were stopped was because the Allies beat their butts and sent them to hell. That is the only reason that there are the people that the Nazis didn't like in Europe, and thank God for the men and women that stopped those people. And I think it's so disrespectful to, not only disrespectful to the actual people who stopped the Nazis, not only disrespectful to history, not only disrespectful to people who actually died under the Nazis, but the people that suffered under racist America, which thankfully, although not as bad as Nazis, was still racist and still not fair to them. But it's also disrespectful because one of the things that led to the civil rights movement and the ending of institutional racism, or at the very least not making it legalized, was that in World War II was one of the first times, especially en masse, that America used mixed race units in the army, military, where whites and blacks would be fighting side by side. And that did an uncountable job at actually hurting the racist dogma of the time, because it was the first time many people saw that people of different skin colors weren't like these stereotypes or these lesser people. They were people just like them. It turns out one of the greatest cures to deal with racism is fighting your same enemy, because it turns out when you're shooting at Nazis, you don't really care about the skin color on the guy's back and helping you. And it's just disrespectful to the memory of those people back then, and the idea that it bothers me. And there's a lot of other occasional anti-American stuff in it, but the fact they would go to that kind of lie, that they would compare it just shows that you can't trust them. You cannot trust this documentary. You cannot trust the people in this documentary, because that just shows all that I've shown you. They tell lies. This is Netflix Cleopatra levels of bad, maybe worse in a little bit. And I'm shocked that no one's talked about it before. I was convinced I'd find something on YouTube or someone talking about it, but it seemed like it just flew under the radar. But no, someone had to talk about it. It had to be me. But I want to go over the ending part of the video, the documentary, I mean. The last little bit of claim that is just funny to me, where they tried to claim that all people, you, me, the sun, well, not the sun, but all people, right, are possessed by the gods of different mythologies, right? I find that so stupid. First of all, because it's a kind of silly claim, but also, possession means taking over someone's body, right? So you're telling me that if this is going on for all history, that the African people who were enslaved for hundreds of years didn't use their powers to escape at any point from being gods, which, ironically enough, is so insulting to the actual people who had to live under slavery, because you act like they just had a win button that could have got them out immediately. That's disrespectful to actual memories and actual people. So, yeah. This video was a night. It was so hard to make and so hard to get through this documentary. But like I said, I will link the Tubi and Amazon article to this, or the link to this, because I'm being fully transparent with you. I did not make any of this stuff up. I did not lie or exaggerate purposefully at any point. And I left out a bunch of stuff too, but I just had to talk about it. People need to know this kind of nonsense exists sometimes. And it's just, if there's a message to close out this, do your research. Well, first of all, don't be racist, and do your research. Honestly, good motifs to live by, really. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this video. If you have opinions on it, either positive or negative, like, comment, subscribe down below, and all that jazz. And I will see you all next time.
Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.